As coronavirus cases continue to surge in states across the country, President Trump has been quietly continuing his all-out assault on the environment. So we decided to take a break from the breaking news of the day to see how Trump is taking advantage of a global crisis to make things even worse for vulnerable Americans. This is the Check-In. President Trump has been a colossal failure at the one thing Americans are most desperate for him to do: contain the coronavirus. He hasn't increased testing, he hasn't dealt with the economic fallout, and you can be forgiven for thinking he hasn't been doing anything at all. However, he has been very successful at rolling back environmental regulations and weakening major conservation laws, all while Americans have been distracted by a global pandemic, because instead of pulling back on pollution when lungs are having their worst year since Mad Men went off the air, Trump has actually been doubling down on his dangerous agenda. According to reports, during the COVID-19 lockdown, U.S. federal agencies have eased fuel efficiency standards for new cars, frozen rules for soot air pollution, and continued to lease public property to oil and gas companies when clean air is perhaps most important for the health and safety of everyday Americans. It's when Trump seems to be doing nothing that he's at his most dangerous. It's like when your kids are upstairs and they're super quiet for way too long. You know you're about to wallpaper over some Sharpie. That is not the path of a hurricane, Tyler. But of course, whenever Trump does something quietly, it's only because everything else he's doing is so loud that it seems quiet in relation. Trump can't be quiet. He'd be a terrible ninja. I came through the window. You probably didn't hear me because I'm quiet like the wind. That's what my karate master told me. Even worse, Trump is using the coronavirus pandemic, which has disproportionately affected people of color, to push through anti-science policies under the guise of creating more jobs. Jobs that rarely go to the people most hurt by these policies.
Air pollution has been linked to higher coronavirus death rates, along with many other health problems. And air pollution is usually worse in areas with larger minority populations.
The folks with the smallest carbon footprints are the ones who will feel the most pain.
We have just been beat down. The people are devastated. I don't think anybody's life is worth a job.
If people of color and low income who are most affected by the issues are never in the rooms where the decisions are being made, we are going to continue to have two different worlds, two different realities.
No surprise that Trump doesn't care what happens to people of color, but he also doesn't believe it's happening at all, as evidenced by this tweet from 2014 when Trump wrote, "Give me clean, beautiful, and healthy air, not the same old climate change, global warming bull. I am tired of hearing this nonsense." In fact, Trump's view that global warming is a hoax is one of the only stances he's been consistent on. That, and there's no such thing as a tie that's too long. I like it to just brush the top of the knee. For example, he repeated his same bizarre claims, sprinkled with some self-aggrandizement at the last G7 summit when a reporter questioned Trump's skepticism about climate change.
In a nutshell, I want the cleanest water on earth. I want the cleanest air on earth. And that's what we're doing. And I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I have done more environmental impact statements probably than anybody that's, I guess I can say definitely, because I've done many of them, more than anybody that's ever been president or vice president or anything even close to president.
You can't claim you're an environmentalist just because you look like a compost heap. Also, what do you mean you've done more on the environment than anybody that's even been close to president? You know you're not close to president, right? You're there. I mean, Al Gore was close to president, and he at least made a full movie about the environment. I should note, if there was a movie about Trump, A Convenient Lie would be a good title. Did I write a check to Stormy Daniels? You know, if I did, I don't remember. But of course, Trump doesn't actually want clean air and water. In fact, one of his first actions he took as president proved that. In early 2017, he signed an executive order to start the process of repealing an Obama-era clean water regulation known as the Waters of the United States rule. The rule limited the amount of pollution that developers and landowners could dump into our waterways, and Trump's repeal, which environmentalists called a sickening gift to polluters, was finalized less than a year ago. And in the last few weeks, Trump bragged about that at two separate events while telling the same weird story about how people were allegedly so overwhelmed with emotion because of his actions.
We stopped the egregious abuse of the Clean Water Act. When I signed that legislation, I had many farmers and construction people standing behind me. People that haven't cried since they were a baby, some of them never even when they were a baby, and they were crying. We did the U.S. Waters, you saw that, the U.S. Waters Act, that was a big one. Grown men that had never cried, even when they were a baby. They were standing behind me when I signed that bill at the White House, and they were crying. They were crying because we gave their life back to them.
For all the lying Trump does, you'd think he'd get a little better at it. All you did was sign an order. Why are you acting like a revival tent preacher? I healed her husband's rotted leg, and oh, how she cried and thanked me. Oh, she was more tears than woman she was. And also, nobody was crying. Check it out.
So how important is this?
Maybe he mistook that guy sweating and thought his neck was crying. Why does he keep saying some of them never cried even when they were babies? I mean, even for a weird man, that is a weird detail to add. It really hammers home what an egomaniac he is. It's not enough to make someone cry like a baby. He has to make them cry for the first time in their lives. I turned them from Data into Dawson. And yeah, that is Back-to-Back Nights, referencing a show that went off the air in 2003. Either way, the truth doesn't stop Trump from using that ridiculous anecdote to promote yet another harmful initiative gutting the National Environmental Policy Act. It's a 50-year-old conservation law that requires federal agencies to take into consideration the environmental impact of infrastructure projects before they're approved. Everything from how it would affect local wildlife to projected greenhouse gas emissions. It also allowed residents to weigh in on those plans. But now, public review would be limited in order to speed up the permitting of freeways, power plants, and pipelines, one of the biggest and most audacious deregulatory actions of the Trump administration. And once again, Trump used the coronavirus as cover for why something like this needs to be implemented. And look, I think we can all agree we need better roads and bridges. But I don't think Trump wants the roads to be better. He just wants them to be straighter.
There's a highway in a certain state, short road, not even a highway, I guess, more of a roadway. And they put in, it was a straight line from point to point. By the time they finished it 18 years later, it was this. It cost tens of times. It cost many, many, many times more than the original. Is a dangerous roadway because there's turns. You got to be in good shape. You got to be wide awake to make those turns. You got to see those things. You have to see the guardrails, Bob.
I can't believe I have to say this, but you should be wide awake when you drive, no matter how many turns there are on the roads. Under Trump, our roads are going to be so straight you can daydream and even doze off in some places. Also, he thinks you have to be in good shape to be able to turn a steering wheel. I might explain the shape he's in. He thinks driving to the gym is the workout. All right, made it. Time to hit the showers. Now, by ignoring the environmental effects of major construction projects, Trump is once again harming the communities that have already been much worse off throughout his presidency. Critics point out that these new rules sideline the concerns of poor and minority communities impacted by those projects. Rather than listen, the Trump administration's plan aims to silence such voices. And if it wasn't clear before this, the differences between the two choices we have in November couldn't be more obvious. For example, the same week Trump touted his pollution-permitting proposals, Joe Biden announced his clean energy plans.
Joe Biden announcing his own plan to invest $2 trillion over 4 years on clean jobs and infrastructure.
These investments are a win-win-win for this country. Creating jobs, cutting energy costs, protecting our climate. When Donald Trump thinks about climate change, the only word he can muster is hoax. When I think about climate change, the word I think of is jobs.
He's right. The work we need to do to slow climate change will create thousands of new jobs, like building solar panels and wind farms. The problem with a president like Trump is that everyone he knows and is beholden to got rich on old jobs like coal mining and oil pipelines and invading Ukraine. The Trump presidency will be over someday, but the sad reality is that the environmental effects will be permanent, and that becomes everyone's problem, because if we don't start taking climate change seriously and making major changes, we're all going to be crying like babies, even if we never cried like babies in the first place. I want to make that point. That's a very important point to add. Not everyone cried when they were a baby. This has been The Check-In.